Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this 22nd day of April 2022. Hi, right here in Brisbane. It's a cool 20 degrees today. It's partly cloudy, though the prediction is for a sunny day ahead of us. Well, welcome to this Friday as we head into the weekend. And what a weekend this is going to be. There's so much that's happening right here in Brisbane and all the way around. Just towards the end of the program, we will today also feature all the functions and events taking place in and around Brisbane. Well, right now, let's get on with the news for today. And don't forget that we'll also have the Daily India report coming up today as well. But right now, as we know that the debate which took place yesterday, but right now, Anthony Albanese has tested positive to COVID.
Labor leader Anthony Albanese has just tested positive for coronavirus. It means the opposition leader will have to isolate for 7 days, just as the election campaign was beginning to pick up momentum. Political editor Andrew Probyn has the latest from Canberra.
The risks were always obvious, especially to the candidate who, unlike Scott Morrison, hasn't caught the virus. In a written statement from the Labor camp tonight, Anthony Albanese has revealed he tested positive after a routine PCR test taken just before he was due to travel to WA. His entire campaign will now be suspended. Instead of a punishing schedule of marginal seat visits, he'll be isolating in his Sydney home for the next 7 days. Does this give Scott Morrison a campaign advantage? Well, Anthony Albanese can at least be assured his opponent chose a 6 rather than a 5-week campaign, and he'll now be relying on his trusted Labor allies to carry the show without him. Just in case anyone thinks COVID-19's stopped throwing its curveballs, Labor's just been reminded that pandemic politics still has its twists.
That shock announcement capped off a day dominated by the Chinese security pact with Solomon Islands. It's triggered a full-blown election fight over who's best to tackle an assertive Beijing.
The Scott Morrison travelling show becomes a wandering fact check, mixing among his opponent's target audience.
And that's a complete lie. That's not going to happen.
The Prime Minister striking out against a Labor scare campaign pitched at pensioners.
We are not extending the cashless debit card to pensioners.
We're not proposing.
I'm sorry.
Fear and loathing spilling over from the night before, sparked by a comment the PM made in answer to Catherine, whose 4-year-old autistic son Ethan has lost disability funding.
Jenny and I have been blessed. We've got 2 children that haven't had to go through that.
Interpreted by some as insensitive to the many parents of children with a disability.
To have a Prime Minister say he was blessed not to have one of those is deeply offending.
I think every child is a blessing for parents.
Prompting a rare apology.
I was seeking to respect the challenges they face, not the opposite. And I would hope that people will accept that at face value, and I deeply apologise for any offence that it caused.
But the PM's not backing down from this prickly moment in the first campaign face-off.
Why would you take China's side?
That's an outrageous slur from the Prime Minister.
In fact, he's doubling down.
Have they backed the Australian government in standing up for Australia? Or have they run the talking points? Have they run the lines of those who are seeking to criticise Australia?
The Prime Minister attempting to brush off the embarrassment of the Solomon Islands signing a military pact with China, despite his government's pleas to ditch it.
Scott Morrison always goes missing, and he always blames someone else.
Over the last 3 years, he has sought to make a virtue, not of being a big ideas man, but being a no ideas man.
Although the Labor leader did offer the truest assessment today.
The issue with Beijing will be problematic, regardless of who is in government.
Even though national security is being weaponised in this election campaign, the truth is China's belligerence has permanently reshaped Australia's foreign policy settings. Beijing's meddling in the Solomons is a dangerous development that directly imperils the national interest and regional security. So should Labor win, Anthony Albanese would very likely be urged by intelligence agencies and the diplomatic corps to adopt a stance on China as hardline as Scott Morrison's. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
While the two leaders squabbled over the Solomon Islands Security Pact, an international diplomatic operation is underway to limit the fallout. President Joe Biden's top Asia advisor will fly to Honiara tomorrow to urge the Pacific nation not to allow a permanent Chinese military presence so close to Australia. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
American diplomatic reinforcements arrive in the Pacific. White House heavyweight Kurt Campbell landing in Papua New Guinea en route to Honiara.
Sir, what are some of the chief concerns around the Solomon Islands-China deal that you'll be looking to discuss?
Thank you. We'll have some comments later.
His visit is too late to stop the signing of the China-Solomon Islands Security Pact.
Good to see you. Thank you.
But now the US and its allies are scrambling to deal with the fallout.
Australia and Scott Morrison has just gone missing.
There's frustration in Washington about being blindsided by the controversial agreement and soul-searching about what more the West could have done in Solomon Islands to head it off.
The members of Parliament want something tangible to give to their regions, and neither the United States or Australia has probably done enough in that regard.
Here, the Prime Minister still won't say exactly when Australia learned of the details of the deal.
I have known for some time the risk of a deal such as this coming about.
Others are hinting at possible darker methods employed by a cashed-up Beijing.
China operates by different rules, and we should be very frank and very clear about that. Now, they can answer questions as to what they're prepared to do in relation to negotiations.
Those close to Solomon Islands leader Manasseh Sogavare are dismissing demands to make the secretive document public, suggesting hypocrisy from Australia, which hosts its own foreign military facility.
There are people in Australia who know very little about Pangap in the middle of the desert, the military base of the United States.
Australian government sources reject that line of attack, saying it's very similar to the language used by China, another indicator, perhaps, of how far some elites in Honiara have drifted into Beijing's orbit. That doesn't mean there'll be Chinese military boots on the ground in Solomon Islands any time soon, but that prospect is no longer a distant one. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Canberra.
Interesting developments indeed. And of course, look, when a country like Solomon's need things and there are other countries who are prepared to offer those kind of security deals and protection and other things, and of course, some cash also helps. So, they've got themselves a deal. And, the West who probably could have done something more as well and paid a little bit more attention to Solomon's. Well, so that is such a development that's there. Well, of course, we know at one stage when Facebook came out, people were saying, this is kid stuff. Now, it is a major, major platform for everyone, all politicians. So how did a Facebook post fueled Labor's opposition?
The Labor Party is writing to pensioners and scaring them.
Well, here's what Anne Ruston said. We're seeking to put all income management onto the universal platform, which is the cashless debit card.
It's just simply not true.
It's been one of the most heated debates in the election campaign so far. Claims and counterclaims of pensioners being forced onto a cashless debit card. So, where did it all start? In May last year, New South Wales carer Corinne Boone called her local National Party MP's office. She says she asked one of his staffers about the cashless debit card.
And I said, but why would you want aged pensioners or carers on it? And he said it's much safer for them than them carrying cash around.
Corinne Boone then posted about the conversation on an anti-cashless debit card Facebook group, which had over 3,000 members. It was shared multiple times, with new information claiming it was proof of LNP plans and propaganda strategy. A few days later, it was picked up by Labor MP Julian Hill, who claimed that it exposed Scott Morrison's secret plan to force Australia's pensioners onto the cashless welfare card. A fact check by RMIT found those posts were the start of Labor's scare campaign, a claim the party denies. At least 15 Labor candidates and MPs collectively spent thousands of dollars running Facebook ads mentioning the cashless debit card, which were viewed up to 400,000 times. Labor also set up a Protecting Pensioners Task Force, which held forums around the country.
If re-elected, Scott Morrison will force aged pensioners onto this card right across the country. People don't want Scott Morrison's cashless pension card. They don't want it.
The Council on the Ageing says it's been trying to hose down the social media firestorm.
There are some very substantive policy issues in retirement incomes that could be debated, rather than each side trying to scare people.
A spokesperson for the Labor Party said that Labor makes no apologies for highlighting this issue, which they claim started with the government. Elise Worthington, ABC News.
There you are, Facebook in the middle of it, the platform that's being used, and posts that have been boosted to get 400,000 plus views on there. Well, of course, we have looked at both sides of the politics. What about the independents? How do they hold the balance of power?
In the bluest of blue WA seats, a teal-clad army is trying to shake things up as voters mull their verdict.
Have you decided how you're voting at this election?
No, I'm still thinking about it, but obviously I'm interested in Cheney because that's why I'm here.
Ultimately, if I vote for an independent, that means a Labor government, then I probably wouldn't vote for an independent.
I'm so disillusioned with the Liberal and the Labor parties and in general, and I'm so worried about what we'll be leaving behind.
So you're voting for an independent?
Yes, yes.
Taking in Perth's affluent western suburbs, Curtin has long been the jewel in the WA Liberal Party's crown. It's only been taken from the Liberals once by an independent in 1996 and was held by former Foreign Minister Julie Bishop for almost 21 years. Her replacement since 2019, Liberal MP Celia Hammond, might have been forgiven for thinking re-election in the safe Liberal seat would be a walk in the park. But she's facing a serious challenge from Climate 200-backed candidate Kate Cheney.
I think anybody who considers a seat safe is not doing their job properly. As an elected representative, your role is to get out, meet your community, represent them, assist them, and that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years and what I hope to be able to continue to do.
Curtin's normally a safe seat. In fact, at the last election it had the biggest Liberal margin of any seat in Western Australia. However, we don't live in normal times, and sometimes safe seats are happy hunting grounds for independents.
Celia Hammond is responding to the Teal push, highlighting her support for a federal anti-corruption commission and saying she supports economically responsible climate action.
I'm part of a Liberal Party and a Liberal government that actually committed to net zero by 2050, and I was part of the group that worked within the party to encourage the leadership of the party to actually formally adopt that target and to adopt and clearly set out a plan to get there.
That's despite once questioning the extent of humanity's impact on climate change in a 2019 newspaper interview.
You know, as a newbie politician who's now been in for 3 years, what I can say is that that in the course of explaining something or responding to something, you can look back on it and say, could have expressed that better.
The independent candidate...
Of course, expressing yourself better, many times things that come out on the spur of the moment, especially in an unprepared, situation, could come back and bite you. So, many a times you can always go back and think that, oh my God, I could have done that better or expressed that better. Right now, the highlight is on Barnaby Joyce as he backs Richmond Nationals candidate after the social media campaign.
Lastly, Deputy Kim, from me, your candidate in the seat of Richmond, Kimberly Hone, there's a Guardian report this morning which has revealed that she's made comments. Her ultimate goal is to bring God's kingdom to the political arena. She's described transgender surgery as mutilation, and she's also said that one way to avoid domestic violence is to marry well. Have you spoken to her about those comments?
Look,
Yes, I'm not going to disclose private conversations that I have. What I can say is in a couple of days we celebrate Anzac Day, which gives people the right to say it's a free country. You can say what you like in this country because people have fought and died for it. Now, if you don't agree with someone's views, that's also your right and how you express it. But I'm not going to start this pile-on of certain people because that works completely at odds with what we respect in this nation, which is your right of free speech. Now, I think it is unfair that someone who's born with the physical capabilities, XX chromosome, as opposed to XY chromosome. If you're born XX as a woman, born XY as a man, the idea that you'd be competing in the same event is inherently unfair. Inherently unfair. I have 4 daughters, and I think it's inherently unfair. I don't think the world record for the 100 metres, women's 100 metres, wouldn't even stand up against the world record for people at high school, for blokes. To say they're going to run in the same race is just wrong.
What do you make of that specific comment about transgender surgery being mutilation? Can you endorse that?
Look, I think that what a person does with their own body, by their own volition, under their own, as a free choice, is probably a question for them and not for me.
And there you go, the political correctness, and in today's day and age, you need to be ever so careful about what you say, and being very, very sensitive to the community that we live in today, which is, there's all kinds. So, you need to respect each and every one and not, hurt anyone's feelings. So, which often is hard to do. Well, of course, in the middle of all of these things, there are claims, there are counterclaims, there are social media posts, there are policies, but how true are those things? So who is fact-checking, who is checking all the correctness?
The leader's made many claims, especially about the economy. So let's take a look at some of those now. In his opening remarks, Anthony Albanese had this to say about inflation.
You all know that the cost of everything is going up, but your wages aren't.
While it is correct to say that broadly costs are going up faster than wages, not everything has increased in price. Inflation is at 3.5%, higher than wages increases at 2.3%. But some things have dropped in price. Healthcare has fallen in the last year, and clothing and shoes and communication have steadily fallen. Overall, though, the cost of living is outstripping wages growth. Sticking with the economy, here's another claim from Mr Morrison.
When we went into the pandemic, we were facing the biggest economic crisis we had seen since the Great Depression. To give you an example, the economic recession that we went through because of the pandemic was 30 times worse than what occurred during the global financial crisis. 30 times worse.
The PM first made this claim last year, comparing the size of the GDP contractions during the GFC and the pandemic. But the economic experts we spoke to said it was confusing and misleading use of data, essentially comparing apples with oranges. They said a more conventional assessment would likely find the pandemic recession was twice the size of the GFC. And here's another claim from Anthony Albanese.
Before the pandemic had hit, it's important to remember that they had already doubled the debt.
Now, while it's correct that the dollar figures for gross debt doubled and net debt increased even more between 2013 and the start of the pandemic, it's not the whole story. A fairer comparison should take into account the changing size of the economy. This chart shows gross and net debt as a proportion of GDP, and by this measure, gross debt grew by 65% and net debt by 85%. Here's a final claim from the Prime Minister.
In Fiji, we vaccinated the entire country so their economy can be opening up again.
Not quite correct. While Australia did supply the vast majority of Fiji's vaccinations at 1.6 million doses, some of those were delivered in conjunction with UNICEF and New Zealand, and the US, the UK, India and Japan gave around 300,000 doses to Fiji in total. For all the details and more fact-checked claims, head to the...
There you go. As I mentioned, claims and counterclaims, but Well, right now, a bit of international news as well before we close off and go to our daily India report. Boris Johnson is in trouble.
The government recognises the seriousness of the issues under consideration. And can I say this at the outset? The Prime Minister has always been clear that he is happy to face whatever inquiries Parliament sees fit, and he's happy for the House to decide how it wishes to proceed today, and therefore will not be whipping Conservative members of Parliament. They are free to vote according to how they believe we should move forward on this. Now, we tabled an amendment last night because we wanted to be explicit about ensuring that Sue Gray is able to complete and publish her report without any further delay, as well as allow the Metropolitan Police to conclude their investigations. We now recognise that in practice this is almost certainly likely to be the case, and therefore we are happy for the Labour motion to go through, if that is the will of the House.
The question is, as on the order papers, many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it.
So there you go. And of course, now moving on, let's take a look at what's happening in Ukraine.
This is the scene of Ukraine's final stand to hold Mariupol. Beyond the Peace and Freedom Square is a city bombed into submission. Out of view are more than 100,000 trapped civilians, bunkered down through 8 weeks of war. These are a few of Mariupol's more fortunate, boarding buses as part of a planned evacuation from the ruined city.
We're going to Zaporizhzhia to my sister's, 5 of us together with my grandson. We need a break after the shelling, after this nightmare. We've been hiding in basements for 30 days.
This woman, overcome with emotion, says she's going to be with her son. She had bought a ticket to see him just before the war started. They're leaving a city hollowed out by Russia's war machine, but thousands more didn't make it out. The mayor here says at least 10,000 civilians have died. Now Russia has announced it's holding back its troops from storming a steelworks factory, where civilians are holed up with Ukraine's few remaining soldiers in the city.
I consider the proposed storming of the industrial zone unnecessary. I order you to cancel it.
And as Moscow focuses on the east, the people of Kharkiv are under increasing attack, driving them underground.
For those who've managed to get out of Ukraine's east, they may have escaped just in time. Russia's intensifying war effort in the Donbass means transit points out of there into here in the capital are likely to be increasingly closed off and the journey more dangerous.
The situation in the east and south of the country remains as severe as possible. The occupiers aren't abandoning their attempts to score at least some victory by launching a new, large-scale offensive.
These women managed to reach safety, now taking shelter in what used to be a restaurant in the central city of Dnipro.
I want to go home.
I just want a truce. I want to go home. I want nothing else. I want the children to be happy.
They're part of an exodus of an estimated 12 million people forced to flee their homes since the Russian invasion began, more than a quarter of Ukraine's population. Europe's biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War, and still growing. Sean Rubenstein Dunlop, ABC News.
And that are some very, very grieving thoughts there. And the situation is not getting any better. Well, right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, Mauritian Prime Minister Pravind Kumar Jugnauth and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi discussed relations after inaugurating the Global Ayush Summit in Gujarat on April 20th. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a bilateral meeting with Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Kumar Jugnauth on April 20th, after the inauguration of the Global Ayush Summit. The two leaders discussed the ongoing development partnership and cooperation in defense. Modi inaugurated the Global Ayush Investment and Innovation Summit at Mahatma Mandir in Gandhinagar in the presence of the Mauritius Prime Minister and Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General, World Health Organization. The Mauritius Prime Minister is on an 8-day visit to India to strengthen bilateral ties. Indian Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said that Modi and Jugnauth reviewed progress of the Metro Express project and the proposal for an Ayush Centre of Excellence in Mauritius. Indian spokesman said discussions included ongoing development partnership and cooperation in defense, capacity building, people-to-people exchanges and #Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations. In his remarks at the inauguration of the Global Ayush Investment and Innovation Summit, Jugnauth praised India and the Gujarat state for their contribution to the field of traditional medicine. He also noted India's support in the health sphere in his country. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson started his India visit from Ahmedabad on April 21st and became the first British Prime Minister to visit Gujarat state. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson started his India visit from Ahmedabad in the Gujarat state on April 21st. Johnson becomes the first British Prime Minister to visit the state. Johnson may also visit Sabarmati Gandhi Ashram before meeting his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi on April 22nd in New Delhi to discuss strategic defence, diplomacy and economic partnership. His India visit is important in the backdrop of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that has led to some divergences in New Delhi's and London's positions on the crisis. UK government said the visit will include meeting with leading businesses to discuss the UK and India's thriving commercial, trade and people links. This will be the first time a UK Prime Minister will visit Gujarat, India's fifth largest state and the ancestral home of around half of the British Indian population in the UK. Johnson is expected to focus on strengthening security cooperation between India and the UK in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as strategic defence in the light of increasing Russian aggression in Ukraine. On April 17th, Johnson had said, quote, "As we face threats to our peace and prosperity from autocratic states, it is vital that democracies and friends stick together. My visit to India will deliver on the things that really matter to the people of both our nations, from job creation and economic growth to energy security and defence. India, as a major economic power and the world's largest democracy, is a highly valued strategic partner for the UK in these uncertain times." End quote. Notably, throughout the Ukraine conflict, India has maintained a strategically neutral stance on Russia. Modi has expressed concern over the use of violence against civilians, such as that recorded in Bucha, but India has opted to abstain on critical UN votes condemning Russia. At the G20 Emerging Market Economies meeting organized by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman called upon members for coordinated action across countries to enable swift post-pandemic recovery and to build resilience to future shocks. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said that there is an urgent need for coordinated action across countries to not only enable swift post-pandemic recovery but also to build resilience to future shocks as she attended the G20 Emerging Market Economies meeting. Sitharaman shared her insights on the economic outlook risks and near-term policy changes for emerging market economies, such as food and energy security and tightening of global financial conditions. Indian Ministry of Finance said the G20 Emerging Market Economies meeting was organized by the IMF on the sidelines of the upcoming G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting. Discussing the future of work and debt vulnerabilities, Sitharaman said that there is an urgent need for coordinated action across countries. The Finance Ministry of India tweeted, quote, "The Finance Minister, speaking on the need for #environmentally, #sustainable and financially viable alternatives of energy sources, said that @iSolar Alliance can be an effective platform to catalyze efforts in this direction." End quote. Sitharaman arrived in Washington on April 18th for the annual spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Vietnamese aircraft carrier Vietjet is starting 4 new flight routes connecting the Indian metros of Mumbai and New Delhi to Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City and Phu Quoc. Vietnamese carrier Vietjet on April 20th announced 4 new flights linking India and Vietnam. Among them are Mumbai Hanoi, Mumbai Ho Chi Minh City, New Delhi Phu Quoc and Mumbai Phu Quoc. The airline said that the direct services from Mumbai to Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi will commence operation on June 3rd and June 4th with a frequency of 4 weekly return flights and 3 weekly return flights respectively. From September 9th onwards, the Mumbai Phu Quoc route will operate 4 round trips per week, while the New Delhi Phu Quoc will operate with a frequency of 3 round trips per week. Prior to the pandemic, Vietjet had operated 2 direct routes linking India's capital city of New Delhi with Vietnam's capital city of Hanoi and the financial hub of Ho Chi Minh City, in addition to charter flights from Vietnam to Bodh Gaya, the Indian Buddhist pilgrimage site. The 2 existing services between New Delhi and Ho Chi Minh City/Hanoi will soon resume on April 29th and April 30th respectively, with a frequency of 3 weekly return flights on each route. Indian universities have announced scholarships for international students to improve their international rankings and boost the enrollment of international students. Indian universities have started announcing scholarships for deserving international students to improve their international rankings and boost the enrollment of international students. In one such instance, Banaras Hindu University recently announced the Institutes of Eminence funded scholarship for international students. The initiative will encourage the international students and deal with the limited scholarship offered by Indian Council for Cultural Relations that is offered to international students seeking admission at Indian institutes. Under the scholarship, the foreign students will receive Rs 6,000 per month. The scholarship will be managed by the IOE funds allocated to the university. Enrollment of foreign students in an institute is one of the major parameters in any international ranking. Several Indian institutes hope that innovative scholarships will encourage more students to their campus. It will also help international students since very few students manage to get ICCR scholarships. Around 95% of international students at BHU do not have a scholarship and are self-financing their education. The scholarship of Rs 72,000 per year will help them and attract more students. BHU gets students largely in the technical courses, and the scholarship will have students enrolling in the conventional courses. BHU has students from South Asian countries such as Nepal, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. Most overseas students enroll in courses in agricultural sciences, performing arts, visual arts, commerce and arts and social sciences. Jamia Millia Islamia University too has several students from Afghanistan and Africa coming for education, but the institute does not have any specific scholarships for international students. The Indian stock market has recovered from a 5-day losing streak on the back of Reliance, HDFC, TCS and Maruti stocks, as well as positive global cues. After falling for 5 consecutive days, Indian stock market indices recovered on April 20th with the help of strong buying support in Reliance, HDFC, TCS and Maruti stocks amid positive global cues. Benchmarks drew strength from Wall Street, which ended on a positive note on April 19th, ending Dalal Street's 5-day losing streak. The Bombay Stock Exchange Index, Sensex gained 574.35 points or 1.02% to close at 57,037.50. The National Stock Exchange Index, Nifty 50, added 177.90 points to end at 17,136.55. IT Telecom, auto and energy stocks made solid gains, while weakness was seen in metals and banking stocks. On the 30 stock index, the most gains were made by Maruti, Ultratech Cement, Reliance and Asian Paints, among others, while Bajaj Twins, ICICI Bank and ITC were among the biggest losers. On Nifty 50, BPCL, Tata Motors and Shree Cements made the most gains, while Bajaj Twins, ICICI Bank and JSW Steel were among the biggest laggards. The makers of Nani starrer Telugu film Ante Sundaraniki have released the teaser of the film. The comedy film will be released simultaneously in Tamil and Malayalam on June 10th. The teaser of the Telugu film Ante Sundaraniki starring Nani and
Ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you on this segment. And right now it's time to go to our functions and events taking place. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in this segment. It's been wonderful having your company. And it's Friday, so make sure you go out and make the best of the weekend. But, of course, always be careful and also always take into account the safety measures and precautions. Look, you know, Anthony Albanese has got the COVID as well. So no one's immune from it. So people are moving about. And we know that it is now in a diluted manner, but it is now in the community. So it's spreading fast as well. And if you haven't had the chance yet, please do so now. Go and get your flu vaccinations as well. Winter's coming, so it's time to get your annual vaccination shot with the flu vaccination. And of course, in the coming years, we'll all get used to getting the COVID-19 vaccination as well. Well, it's been wonderful having your company once again. If there's anything you'd like to see on the show, if there's any event you'd like to talk about, we'd like to welcome you on the show. You too could join us either via the video link or come directly into the studios. But don't forget that today, 4 p.m., Suman Dua will be in the office when we will be running the Migration Ka Safar for this month. And on Sunday at 6 p.m., we will have Music Junction Live. Until then, it's goodbye from me.